Theatre in Colonial India, Playhouse of Power. Book Review. Indian historiography has, by and large, not considered discourses in orality as dependable historical data. A welcome change of late has been the realization about the importance of orality and different genres of oral expression, especially in the Indian context where a large percentage of the population is non-literate. Performance, classical, folk or modern, constitutes an important segment of oral discourse. The various genres of performance, in their multifarious forms, found all over India, constitute an important segment of cultural expression. Historically speaking, most of the forms extant now, originated during the medieval period, largely under the influence of the Bhakti movement. This statement is as true of the elitist courtly arts as of the various folk forms found in rural India. These forms did not merely have a ritualistic function. They were also a means of education to the largely uneducated mass regarding mythology, traditional value system, morality, etc. After colonialism, there emerged a new kind of performance that was directly inspired by the Western model of proscenium theatre. But this form drew heavily from indigenous performance traditions as well. This hybrid, known as modern theatre, became phenomenally popular in different parts of India, during the 19th and 20th centuries. Of late, the emergence and development of this modern theatre and its position in the cultural history of India, has been the subject of serious academic study. The works of scholars like Vasudha Dhamia, Aparna Dhawadkar, Nandi Basha, etc., are proof of this growing interest. The present work under review is a welcome addition to this list. The book contains 13 articles by different authors, on different topics, connected with the growth of modern theatre in India. The book is divided into two sections. The first section, comprising 6 articles, is entitled Theatre, a Contested Site of Modernity and Appropriation. It concentrates on some aspects of the growth of the proscenium-based, West-inspired theatre in India during the colonial age. The second section, Theatre and Gender, Rescribing Patriarchy, comprises 7 articles. These articles center around the question of the actress, the role of women in theatre as artists and also as projected images of femininity. In her introduction, the editor, Lata Singh, explains the logic behind her endeavor. Theatre and performance occupies an important cultural space in India. Most of the articles in this book concentrate on the colonial period, which was also the golden period of commercially organized theatre in various parts of India and in different languages. Many of the papers deal with Bengali and Marathi theatres, in the cities of Calcutta and Bombay, which were also the centres of administration of the colonial rulers. She points out how theatre has not received serious academic attention that it deserves as an important form of cultural expression. This is particularly pertinent because this emerging form of expression was sought to be appropriated by the elite class as well as the newly emerging middle class. Theatre was also an arena of resistance to the colonial rule as well as to the hegemony of the local elite class over cultural forms and the meanings that they generate. Another important fact highlighted in this book is the issue of gender and its complex relation to performance. As the editor points out, not much importance has been given to the implication of gender in the history of theatre in India. One of the high points of this book is that it throws light precisely on this neglected area, bringing out the deeply inbuilt prejudices regarding the female body and its public display, which is part of theatre and performance. The first 2 articles by Urmila Bairadkar and Divajit Bandyopadhyay analyze the important role of music in Marathi and Bengali theatre. From the time of Lebedev, the pioneer who started the genre of modern theatre in India, music formed the cornerstone of Bengali stage, as the author points out. This statement is equally true of company theatre in the rest of India as well. The heroines' songs, in Sangeet Natak, became a musical code which offered a glimpse into the social code. Similarly, the progression from female impersonators to women taking part in performances, was a direct reflection of the societal perception of gender equations. Continuing this analysis of the role of music in popular theatre, Sharmalaraj gives an in-depth analysis of Lavani and Pauada, two Marathi folk musical forms, by situating them in the historical context of Peshwa rule. She points out how lower caste women were forced to slavery even as they became performers of the erotic Lavani, to satiate the upper caste male clientate. The Pauada, on the other hand, was sung by men, and these songs extolled the brave deeds of Maratha heroes. So in the moral yardstick of the middle class, the folk theatre of Tamasha and Lavani were often projected as vulgar. Two articles deal with the history of Tamil theatre. One on special drama by Susan Caesar, analyzes this unique form that emerged in Tamil Nadu, which is a hybrid of proscenium and folk street theatre. Another essay by Mangai and Ayusu, tries to construct the history of Tamil theatre in colonial times through drama notices. These notices reflect on the social norms and caste, gender restrictions that prevailed during those times. These drama notices also serve as documents that throw light on the social exigencies like the participation of Dalits, as spectators and as artists. The last article in section I is about the adaptation of Shakespeare in Urdu by Parsi theatre groups. While Shakespeare was taught in schools and colleges as an example of British cultural superiority, Parsi theatre, catering to the common man, took great liberties with the Bard of Stratford. In fact, their attitude towards Shakespeare was so irreverential that the author calls these attempts appropriations rather than adaptations. They were attempts at nativizing Shakespeare. In the last few decades of the 19th century there were as many as 75 adaptations of Shakespeare in Urdu. Such adaptations can also be viewed as attempts to subvert the cultural values of the colonizers, though at an unconscious level. Section 2 deals with theatre and gender and has 7 articles, which analyze various facets related to the actress's question, women performing in public spaces. The emerging middle class, which was becoming a powerful segment of society, created an idealized image of the chaste woman, Kuleen, and looked upon the actress as the other, as fallen, or loose, who belonged to the public space. As Lata Singh points out, their entire performing community is on the margins of mainstream moral order, and in that the women performers are doubly marginalized. If women began performing in Bengal from the 19th century itself, Marathi theatre's practice of female impersonation continued till the first few decades of the 20th century. Lata Singh analyzes this phenomenon in the light of the emerging middle class and its respectability project. The entry of women into theatre as performers led to an intense debate in papers both in Calcutta and Bombay. Nandi Baisha, in her analysis of Prem Chand's story, The Actress, points out how the actresses posed a dual problem to middle-class morality, that concerned their position as public women and also as public women who came from the rank of prostitutes. She points out how even a progressive writer like Prem Chand, who also expounded anti-colonial sentiments, becomes patriarchal where gender issues are concerned. In the article on Manipuri theatre, Imakanta Singh looks at the question of gender in the context of Manipuri culture. The writer points out how the jester and gender are both outside the power structure and so are placed in liminality. Handa Bruin, who is also associated with Kate Ikata curriculum, points out how the girls who are also taught this folk art in the school, face an uncertain future because in traditional Kate Ikata performances, even now men play female roles. After a survey of the rural theatre scene in Tamil Nadu, she points out how the colonial Victorian morality was instrumental in redefining the feminine and the image of a good woman. Tamil Nadu has a long tradition of women performers in the Devadasis. The middle class launched the anti-Norch campaign during the colonial era in order to cleanse the practice, and the system was abolished in 1947. She also analyzes the 19th century perception of the actress as a prostitute not merely in India but even in Europe. The reaction of the actresses themselves as they expose their body and voice to the male gaze is also explored. She ends her study with a projection of the non-Brahminical deities and the picturization of Draupadi in Kate Ikatu as ferocious and vengeful. In fact, the antithesis of the urban educated society's concept of ideal womanhood. This section also contains an article by Sudhan Vedesfand on early Marathi theatre and an in-depth analysis of the Marathi playwright K. Dilker's plays. He analyzes how the concept of ideal womanhood is constructed in these plays. The last two articles deal with women performers belonging to different strata of society. The article by Malini Bhattacharya studies the actresses who were part of theatre in the heydays of the movement. These women came to theatre as part of their political activism. They belonged to all walks of life and they were the harbingers of a radically new trend where the woman performer could show her talent without being stigmatized as a loose woman. These women also had to struggle against prejudices and they succeeded in creating a whole new theatre culture, in which women had a larger space than before. The last article by Baishanu Priya deals with an area that has rarely become a part of Indian theatre history. It deals with English actresses in the period 1789 to 1845, in the English theatre of Calcutta. These actresses came to India and adorned the theatre as well as the social circuits of East India Company. Who were these women who travelled to far-off places like Calcutta? The author calls them adventure travellers who came to the Orient in search of better fortune. These were women of dubious background, but in the colonies, they made a name and fortune. Through the depiction of the details of the career of some actresses like Emma, Esther, Mrs. Leach, etc., the author points out how the twin discourses of exotic Orient and colonial patriarchy were being played out in the lives of these actresses. In all, this book is a welcome addition to our growing knowledge about the origin and development of modern theatre in India. Recent interest in theatre of the colonial times can be attributed to a shift in historiography where orality and performance are being studied as historical documents. Another highlight of this book is the section dealing with theatre and gender. The strong prejudice against the woman performer is a reflection of the moral ethical codes of those days. Several articles highlight the travails faced by actresses of those days who were damned as prostitutes. This question has to be seen in a larger perspective also, including classical, folk, traditional performing arts and the role of women, female impersonators in it. The essays included in this volume deal largely with Bengali, Marathi and Tamil theatres of yesteryears. Many other languages, like Kannada, Telugu and Gujarati had flourishing theatres, but the book does not feature any articles dealing with these areas. Perhaps when dealing with a vast topic like theatre in colonial India such shortcomings can be expected. The editor needs to be congratulated for throwing light on an important facet of theatre history of India. The book should be of interest not merely to theatre historians but also to all those interested in the history of the colonial period.